to the woman who fed me, raised me, and showed me exactly who I never want to be. A failure just like her. My daughter Caroline's words hung in the air of the upscale restaurant we'd chosen for Mother's Day. Her perfectly manicured hand held up a champagne flute, her smile wide and cruel. The table filled with my son-in-law Richard, my 2 grandchildren, and a few family friends burst into uncomfortable laughter. I sat frozen, my hands trembling slightly in my lap. At 65, I'd thought I was past being surprised by life. Clearly, I was wrong. "Mom, you look shocked," Caroline said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Did you really think we'd keep pretending everything was fine forever?" The waiter arrived with our appetizers, oblivious to the tension. I thanked him quietly, buying myself a moment to breathe. "Caroline, perhaps this isn't the place Richard started, but she cut him off. It's the perfect place. After all, Mom always cared so much about appearances." She reached into her designer handbag and slid an envelope across the white tablecloth. It stopped directly in front of my plate. "Go ahead, open it," she urged, taking a sip of champagne. With unsteady fingers, I opened the envelope and pulled out a glossy brochure. Sunset Gardens Assisted Living Facility. Attached was an application with my name already filled out and a sticky note. "Moving day next month. We've already paid the deposit." My throat tightened, not from sadness, from rage. The kind of slow-burning anger that had been building for years. I looked at my daughter's face, so similar to my own at her age, yet somehow a stranger's. When had this happened? When had my little girl, who used to curl up in my lap during thunderstorms, become this cold woman who saw me as nothing but a burden? Memories flooded through me. Working 2 jobs after her father left us when she was 7, putting her through college despite my own dreams being put on hold. The quiet pride I felt when she graduated law school. I raised my water glass slowly, meeting her eyes directly to the daughter who thinks this is the end of my story. Her smile faltered slightly. I could see confusion cross her face. She'd expected tears, begging perhaps even public humiliation. She hadn't expected calm defiance. "Mom, be reasonable," she said. "You're living alone in that big house, forgetting things sometimes. Last month you left the stove once," I said quietly. "In 40 years of cooking, it's not safe," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Besides, we have plans for the house." And there it was, the truth slipping out. This wasn't about my well-being. It was about my 4-bedroom Victorian home in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. The home I'd poured everything into, keeping after the divorce. The home where Caroline and her brother had grown up. The home that was now worth over $1 million. What plans, I asked, though I already knew. Richard cleared his throat. "Caroline thought we could renovate it. The kids could each have their own rooms, and that sunroom would make a perfect home office for me." My grandchildren, 10 and 12, looked uncomfortable. They loved visiting my house with its quirky rooms and the tree house their grandfather had built decades ago. "I see," I said, folding the brochure and placing it back in the envelope. "And my opinion on this doesn't matter." Caroline's eyes hardened. "Mom, let's be practical. You're getting older. Dad left you nothing when he divorced you. You've barely saved anything for retirement. The money from the house will pay for Sunset Gardens for years." What she didn't know, what I'd never told anyone, was that her father hadn't left me completely empty-handed. Robert might have abandoned his family for his young secretary 25 years ago, but guilt had made him generous in ways Caroline never knew about. "I think I'll skip dessert," I said, placing my napkin on the table and standing up. Thank you for the enlightening lunch. Mom, don't be dramatic, Caroline hissed, aware of people at nearby tables glancing our way. Sit down. We're discussing your future. No, I said, finding strength in my voice that surprised even me. You're dictating my future. There's a difference. As I turned to leave, Caroline grabbed my wrist. The appointment at Sunset Gardens is next Tuesday at 10:00 a.m. Richard will pick you up. I gently removed her hand. I won't be there. Mom, she called after me as I walked away. Mom, you're being ridiculous. What are you going to do? I paused at the door and looked back at my daughter. This woman, who'd somehow become a stranger. Something you clearly don't expect. Outside, the May sunshine felt warm on my face. I took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling strangely liberated. The confrontation I'd feared for years had finally happened, and I was still standing. I walked to my car and sat quietly for a moment, thinking about what had just transpired. A lifetime of memories with Caroline flashed through my mind. Her first steps, high school graduation, wedding day. When had her ambition turned to ruthlessness? My cell phone buzzed with text messages from Caroline. Mom, you're embarrassing yourself. We're trying to help you. This is happening whether you like it or not. I turned off my phone and started the car. I knew exactly where I needed to go, who I needed to see, the one person who might understand what I was feeling right now. The last person I ever thought I'd turn to after all these years. As I drove across town toward a neighborhood I hadn't visited in over 2 decades, I rehearsed what I would say when the door opened. Would he even recognize me? Would he care about my problems after all this time? I parked in front of the modest bungalow and checked the address one more time. This was it. Robert's house. My ex-husband's home. The man who'd abandoned us, but who might now be my unexpected ally. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorbell. Before I could press it, the door swung open. Elena Roberts said, his eyes widening in surprise. I was just about to call you. You were... I asked momentarily, thrown off balance. Yes, he said gravely. It's about Caroline. There's something you need to know. Something I should have told you years ago. Robert gestured for me to come inside, his face grave. I hesitated at the threshold, memories flooding back of the last time I'd stood in this doorway. The day he told me he was leaving for Melanie, his 26-year-old secretary. The house was nothing like I'd imagined. Simple, modest even. No trace of the flashy lifestyle he'd chased when he left our family. Photos lined the entryway. Many of Caroline and her brother Michael at various ages, but also newer ones of the grandchildren. You've been keeping tabs on them. I said, not a question, but a realization. Coffee. He offered, leading me to a small kitchen. He'd aged hair, now completely silver lines etched deeply around his eyes. At 68, he looked older than his years. What's this about Caroline? I asked, declining to sit when he pulled out a chair. Some old habits die hard. I wouldn't get comfortable in Robert's house. He sighed heavily. I've been wanting to tell you this for years, but it never seemed like the right time. He opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. About 15 years ago, Caroline came to me for money. A lot of money. For what I asked, finally taking the seat he offered. She said she was starting a design business. Needed capital. He pushed the folder toward me. I gave her $200,000. I leafed through bank statements and a notarized loan agreement. This was right after she finished law school. Yes, but Elena, There was never any business. She used that money for her and Richard's first house, that place in Oakwood Hills. She lied to me. I wasn't surprised Caroline had approached her father for money. They'd maintained a relationship over the years, even if it was primarily transactional. What shocked me was the betrayal of him as well. "There's more," Robert continued. 3 years ago, she came back asking for another loan for the Children's Education Fund, she claimed. I gave her another H100 red zeros and... Let me guess, I said, bitter understanding dawning. No education fund, luxury cars, and that vacation home in Lake Geneva. Robert's voice cracked slightly. "I'm not innocent in any of this, Elena. I know that when I left you and the kids, I tried to ease my guilt by giving Caroline whatever she wanted. I never set boundaries. Why are you telling me this now? Because she came to see me last week." He pulled out another document. "She wanted me to sign this. It's a statement claiming you're mentally incompetent, that you need to be in assisted living. She said, you've been forgetting things, becoming paranoid." My hands shook as I read the paper. This is dated 3 months ago. She's been planning this for a while, Elena. The nursing home taking your house, all of it. When I refused to sign, she threatened to tell her children the real reason I left. Not the sanitized version we all agreed on, which is... Robert looked away. Shame evident in his slumped shoulders, that I'd embezzled from my company to support Melanie, that I didn't just leave for another woman, but that I was almost prosecuted. "You kept quiet about it to protect the kids, and I've been paying you back ever since. The secret we'd kept for 25 years. The monthly deposits into my account that Caroline never knew about. My silence bought and paid for." "Where's Melanie now?" I asked, suddenly noticing the lack of a feminine presence in the house. Left 10 years ago for someone younger, naturally. A hint of bitter irony tinged his voice. Poetic justice, I suppose. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "So, what exactly is Caroline?" after I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Everything, Elena. Your house, my remaining savings. She found out about the payments I've been making to you. She thinks I've been supporting you because you're helpless, not because it was compensation for keeping my secret." I closed the folder. "And now she thinks she can force me into that nursing home, sell my house, and control whatever money you still have." "Yes. And Elena?" He hesitated, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I'm dying. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less." The news should have affected me more than it did, but decades of emotional distance dulled the impact. Still, I felt a twinge of something. Not quite sadness, not quite pity. "Does Caroline know?" "Not yet, but my will." He trailed off. "Let me guess. You've left everything to her and Michael." He nodded. It seemed right at the time, but now knowing what she's planning, he pulled out another document. "This is my revised will. I'm leaving half to Michael, who has never asked me for a penny, and half to you." Me, I couldn't hide my surprise. "Why would you?" "Because I owe you, Elena, for everything. And because I trust you to do the right thing with it." He pushed the papers toward me. "There's about 1.5 million left. Not a fortune, but enough to ensure you'll never need to worry about a nursing home. Caroline can't touch it." My mind raced. This changed everything, but also nothing. The daughter I'd raised was still trying to strip me of my dignity, my independence, my home. "There's something else," Robert said quietly. "Something I found in Caroline's papers when she left them here last week." He handed me a real estate listing. My house, my home with Caroline listed as the seller. The date of listing next month. She'd already arranged to sell my house out from under me. How could she possibly do this? I own that house outright. Robert slid another document across the table, a power of attorney form with what appeared to be my signature at the bottom. "This is a forgery," I whispered, staring at the remarkably convincing signature. "I thought it might be Robert," replied. "Notice the notary stamp. It's Richard's law partner, James Weston. Of course, Richard's influence extending like a shadow over everything. I remembered signing something at Christmas when I'd been struggling with a bad case of shingles. Caroline had brought over routine paperwork for the property taxes. I'd been in too much pain to read it carefully. "I've been such a fool," I said more to myself than to Robert. "We both have," he replied. "The question is, what do we do now?" I sat in silence for a long moment, the full weight of Caroline's betrayal sinking in. My own daughter, plotting, scheming, willing to discard me like an inconvenient piece of furniture. All for what? Money the house? Or was there something deeper? Some resentment that had festered for years? "I need to speak with Michael," I said finally. "Does he know what his sister is planning?" "I don't think so. He's been in Seattle for the past 5 years. They don't talk much. My son always the quiet one, the peacemaker. We'd drifted apart after he moved across the country. Our communication reduced to holiday calls and occasional emails, but I knew in my heart he wouldn't be part of this," Elena Roberts said, reaching across the table to touch my hand tentatively. I didn't pull away, surprising myself. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please let me help fix this." Before I go, part of me wanted to refuse on principle. Why should I accept help from the man who'd abandoned us? But the practical side of me, the side that had survived raising 2 children alone, that had worked multiple jobs and stretched every dollar, knew that this was no time for pride. "All right," I said, "but we do this my way. No confronting Caroline directly." "Not yet." He nodded, relief evident on his face. "Whatever you need. I need a lawyer, someone not connected to Richard's firm, and I need time to think to plan." As I stood to leave, Robert handed me a key to my lake cabin about 2 hours north. "Caroline doesn't know about it. You'll be safe there while we figure this out." I took the key. An unexpected lifeline. "Thank you," Elena called as I reached the door. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry for everything." 25 years too late, I thought. But I nodded acknowledgement all the same. Back in my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing through options. I couldn't go home. Not now, knowing what I knew. Caroline might be monitoring me, waiting for a reaction to her Mother's Day ambush. My phone buzzed again. More texts from Caroline. "Mom, you're being childish. Call me. Richard is coming over tomorrow to discuss the paperwork. This is happening whether you want it or not." I turned the key in the ignition. Decision made. I needed distance clarity, and most of all, a plan. Caroline thought she was dealing with a helpless old woman who would roll over and accept her fate. She was about to learn how wrong she was. As I drove north toward Robert's cabin, I made a mental list: call Michael, find a lawyer, secure my personal documents, access my emergency savings. The initial shock was wearing off, now replaced by a cold, focused determination. My phone rang. Caroline again. I declined the call and then, on impulse, pulled over at an electronics store. 20 minutes later, I had a prepaid phone that Caroline couldn't track and had turned off my regular cell. Back on the highway, a memory surfaced. Caroline at 7 years old watching me pay bills at the kitchen table, asking why I looked so worried. Sometimes adults have to make hard choices, I'd told her. "I'll take care of you when I grow up, Mommy," she'd promised. Her little face serious. "You'll never have to worry." A bitter laugh escaped me. How life twisted innocent promises into something unrecognizable. The sun was setting as I turned onto the gravel road leading to Robert's cabin. Just as I approached the final bend, my headlights illuminated a familiar car parked near the entrance. My heart nearly stopped. A sleek black BMW. Richard's car. How had they found me? How could they possibly know about this place? As I cut my engine and sat in the gathering darkness, the cabin door opened. A silhouette appeared in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow from inside. Not Richard or Caroline, but someone I hadn't seen in years. Someone who might be my salvation or my final undoing. "Hello, Mom." My son Michael stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the cabin light. I hadn't seen him in person for almost 2 years. The Seattle tech job that had seemed so promising had also created a distance between us that went beyond geographic miles. "Michael," I whispered, almost afraid he might disappear. "How did you? Dad called me," he said, stepping outside and walking toward my car. He explained everything. Relief and caution wared within me. I'd always worried that Michael sided more with his father after the divorce, maintaining a cordial but distant relationship with me. "You drove all the way from Seattle?" I asked as he opened my car door. "Flew, landed 3 hours ago. He helped me with my hastily packed bag. Dad gave me the keys to this place years ago. I've come here sometimes to think." The cabin was warm pine-scented with a fire crackling in the stone fireplace. Simple furnishings, nothing extravagant. A far cry from the ostentatious lifestyle Robert had pursued after leaving us. "I've made some calls," Michael said, gesturing for me to sit in a worn leather armchair. "Lisa is flying in tomorrow." Lisa, I hadn't heard that name in years. My daughter-in-law, or rather Michael's ex-wife. They'd divorced amicably 5 years ago, but I'd always had a special bond with Lisa, a family law attorney with a razor-sharp mind and an equally sharp tongue. "She's the best lawyer I know," Michael explained, handing me a mug of tea. "And she still cares about you, Mom. She was furious when I told her what Caroline is trying to pull." I cupped the warm mug in my hands, studying my son's face. At 38, he looked more like his father than ever. The same strong jawline, the contemplative eyes, but there was a gentleness Robert had never possessed. "Tell me everything," he said, "from the beginning." So I did. The gradual distancing from Caroline over the years, the subtle comments about my memory, my competence, the Mother's Day, ambush, the nursing home brochure, finding out about the forged power of attorney and the pending house sale. Michael listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "I knew Caroline had changed," he finally said. "But this is criminal. She's your sister Michael, and you're my mother." He leaned forward, his voice low and determined. Caroline crossed a line, several lines. She's not getting away with this. The old me, the peacekeeper, the conciliator, would have tried to soften his anger to find excuses for Caroline's behavior, but that version of me seemed to have disappeared somewhere between the restaurant and Robert's house. "What's the plan?" I asked instead. Michael pulled out his laptop. "First, we document everything. The forged power of attorney is our smoking gun. That's forgery and fraud. Lisa will help us get an injunction to stop any sale of your house. My Caroline has connections through Richard's firm, I reminded him. So do we, Michael countered. Lisa's firm specializes in elder law and financial abuse cases. Plus, she has no love lost for Richard. I remembered the tension between them at Michael and Lisa's wedding. Richard, making condescending remarks about little lawyers from state schools, not realizing Lisa had graduated top of her class from the same Ivy League institution as he had. There's something else Michael said, his expression softening. I found these when I was setting up the cabin for you. He handed me a small wooden box I recognized immediately. My mother's jewelry box. I'd given it to Robert for safekeeping during our divorce when my living situation was unstable. Inside were my grandmother's pearl necklace, my mother's wedding ring, and several family heirlooms I'd assumed were lost years ago. He kept them all this time. I whispered, running my fingers over the smooth wood. He said they were always yours, that he was just waiting for the right time to return them. Michael hesitated. Mom, I know what Dad did was unforgivable, but I think he's genuinely trying to make amends now. I closed the box gently. Sometimes amends come too late, Michael. Maybe he acknowledged, but they still matter. We spent the next few hours strategizing, my teacher's organizational skills meshing with Michael's technical savvy. He helped me secure my bank accounts with new passwords, documented the forged power of attorney, and drafted a timeline of Caroline's suspicious activities. Around midnight, exhaustion finally caught up with me. Michael showed me to the cabin's small bedroom, promising to take the couch. Try to get some sleep, Mom. Lisa will be here in the morning and we'll have a lot to do. Alone in the unfamiliar room, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the day's revelations. The betrayal cut deep, not just Caroline's schemes, but the realization that I'd been blind to who she'd become. Had my love blinded me, or had I simply not wanted to see the truth? I awoke to hushed voices and the aroma of coffee. For a moment, disorientation gripped me before the previous day's events came rushing back. Through the bedroom window, I could see a rental car had joined Michael's BMW. Lisa had arrived. I dressed quickly in the spare clothes I'd packed and emerged to find my former daughter-in-law bent over a stack of documents at the dining table. At 40, Lisa Chen was still striking her sleek black hair, now sporting a few silver strands, her keen eyes missing nothing. Elena, she said warmly, rising to embrace me. I've missed you. It's been too long. I agreed, returning her hug. The divorce had been Lisa and Michael's decision, their careers pulling them in different directions, but losing regular contact with Lisa had been my private sorrow. I hear your daughter is trying to pull some seriously shady business, Lisa said, getting straight to the point as always. Let me assure you we're not going to let that happen. Michael poured me coffee as Lisa laid out her initial assessment. The power of attorney is clearly forged, and we can prove it with a handwriting analysis. The fact that Richard's partner notarized it makes this even more serious. That's an ethics violation that could threaten his bar license. What about my house, I asked. I've already filed an emergency injunction to prevent any sale, Lisa said. But we need to move quickly. Based on what Michael told me, Caroline and Richard are planning to move forward regardless of your wishes. My phone, the new prepaid one, buzzed with a text from Michael's phone. He'd been monitoring my regular cell phone remotely. Caroline's called you 17 times since yesterday, he reported, and left 6 messages. The last one says they're filing a missing persons report if they don't hear from you by noon. Let them, Lisa said with a hint of satisfaction. That actually works in our favor. When you show up safe and sound with legal representation, it makes them look either incompetent or manipulative. The cabin door opened and Robert entered carrying grocery bags. He nodded awkwardly to Michael and Lisa before addressing me. "How are you holding up, Elena?" "Better than expected," I admitted. The anger was still there, but it had transformed into something more focused, more purposeful. "I've been thinking," Robert said, setting down the bags, "about the money I've been paying you all these years." "Dad, maybe now isn't the time," Michael began, but I gestured for him to wait. "What about it, Robert? We've always called it maintenance, but legally it's been more of a private arrangement. Nothing court-ordered." He glanced at Lisa. "Would it be possible to reclassify those payments? Make them official somehow?" "Backdated." Lisa's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "What are you thinking?" "If those payments were officially part of a divorce settlement, they'd be harder for Caroline to challenge, right? And they'd establish a long history of financial support that contradicts her claim that Elena is destitute and needs her house sold." Lisa's expression shifted to respect. "That's actually quite smart. We'd need to file an amended divorce decree. But given that both parties consent, it's doable." I studied my ex-husband, this man I'd once loved, then hated, and now viewed with complicated resignation. "Why are you really doing this, Robert?" He met my gaze directly. "Because it's right. Because I owe you. And because Caroline needs to learn that there are consequences to manipulation and deceit. A lesson I should have taught her long ago." The four of us worked through the morning building our strategy piece by piece. Lisa's legal expertise, Michael's technological skills, Robert's financial resources, and my intimate knowledge of Caroline's patterns all combining into something formidable. Around noon, Lisa's phone rang. Her expression turned serious as she listened. Then she put it on speaker. "Hello, Lisa Chen," she said formally. "This is Richard Harmon," came the smooth, confident voice I recognized as my son-in-law's. "I understand you filed some kind of injunction regarding property belonging to my mother-in-law." "That's correct," Lisa replied coolly. "I'm representing Elena Wilson in this matter." A pause then. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. My wife and I are simply trying to help Elena transition to assisted living. She's been having episodes memory issues. We're concerned about her safety." "Interesting," Lisa said. "And does helping her typically involve forging her signature on a power of attorney and listing her house for sale without her knowledge?" Another longer pause. "I don't know what Elena has told you, but I assure you, everything we've done has been with her best interests in mind. Then you won't mind explaining that to the judge at our emergency hearing tomorrow morning. Oh, and to the Bar Association Ethics Committee when I file my complaint about your partner's notorialization of falsified documents." Richard's tone shifted, hardened. "You're making a serious mistake, Lisa. Caroline and I are trying to protect Elena from herself. If you're enabling her delusions, save it for court, Richard." Lisa cut in and let Caroline know that her mother is perfectly fine, just not where you can manipulate and defraud her. She ended the call and looked at me. "They'll try to paint you as confused, possibly even mentally compromised. We need to be ready for that. I've already scheduled an independent cognitive assessment for tomorrow morning before the hearing." Michael said, "The doctor is a specialist who testifies in elder law cases." I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anxiety about the confrontation ahead, anger at Caroline's betrayal, but most surprisingly, a growing sense of excitement. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, I wasn't just reacting to life's challenges. I was taking control. "There's something else we should consider," I said. An idea taking shape. "Caroline doesn't know about Robert's cancer diagnosis or his revised will." "No," Robert confirmed. "And she doesn't know about the documentation I've kept of her false loan requests either." "We could use that," I suggested, "not as our first move, but as leverage if needed." Lisa looked impressed. "You're thinking strategically, Elena." "Good." Michael's laptop chimed with an alert. His expression darkened as he read the screen. "What is it?" I asked. "They've escalated," he said grimly. "Caroline just had the utilities shut off at your house and changed the locks. They're moving faster than we anticipated." "Can they do that?" I asked Lisa. "Not legally." "No. But they're trying to create a fait accompli. We need to move now then before they can do any more damage." "Agreed," Lisa said, gathering her documents. "Elena, are you ready for this? It's going to get ugly before it gets better." I thought of Caroline's cold smile at the Mother's Day lunch, of her dismissive words, a failure just like her. I thought of the decades I'd spent supporting her, believing in her, loving her, despite her growing ambition and materialism. "Yes," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I'm more than ready." As we prepared to leave the cabin, Michael pulled me aside. "Mom, there's something else you should know. Something Dad didn't tell you." My heart sank. "What is it?" "It's about Caroline's husband, Richard. Dad found something while looking through their loan documents." Michael hesitated. "Tax records showing that Richard's law firm is in serious financial trouble. They've been hiding assets, taking out massive loans." "I think Caroline isn't just being greedy. She's desperate." "Desperate enough to destroy her mother?" I asked. The hurt still fresh. "Desperate people justify terrible things," Michael said quietly. "It doesn't excuse what she's doing, but it might explain it." As we drove away from the cabin, I watched the peaceful lake recede in the side mirror. Ahead lay confrontation, painful truths, and the final unraveling of my relationship with my daughter. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose and clarity. Caroline had raised her glass to my failure, not realizing her words would become the catalyst for my reclamation. She thought she was writing the end of my story. She was about to discover it was merely the beginning of a new chapter. The courthouse steps seemed steeper than I remembered from my teaching days when I'd occasionally been called to testify in family court matters. Lisa walked beside me, her navy suit and confident stride, a sharp contrast to my more casual attire. Michael and Robert followed a few steps behind, an unlikely alliance forged by necessity. "Remember," Lisa whispered as we approached the entrance. "Let me do most of the talking. Judge Martinez knows me, and she has a reputation for being tough but fair, especially in elder abuse cases." Elder abuse? The term still shocked me. In my mind, elder abuse happened to frail, isolated seniors, without family, not to relatively healthy 65-year-olds with 2 adult children and grandkids. But as Lisa had explained during our preparation, financial exploitation by family members was actually one of the most common forms. We'd arrived early to avoid a confrontation before the hearing, but as we entered the courthouse lobby, I saw them. Caroline and Richard, heads bent together in conversation with a distinguished-looking older man I recognized as James Weston Richards' law partner and the notary on the forged power of attorney. Caroline noticed us first. Her perfectly composed expression flickered momentarily with surprise before settling into something harder. She nudged Richard, who straightened and smoothed his tie. "Mom!" Caroline called out, her voice carrying across the marble floor. "Thank God you're all right. We've been worried sick." She strode toward me, arms outstretched as if for an embrace, a performance for any observers. I stood my ground, making no move to meet her halfway. "Save the theatrics, Caroline," I said quietly. "They won't work anymore." Her arms fell to her sides, her mask slipping just enough to reveal the calculation beneath. "What's going on?" "Dad, Michael, what are you both doing here?" Her eyes narrowed at Lisa. "And why is she involved?" "Ms. Wilson has retained me as her attorney," Lisa stated formally. "All communication regarding this matter should go through me from now on." Richard stepped forward, his handsome face arranged in an expression of concerned confusion. "Elena, there seems to be some misunderstanding. We're only trying to help you. The house is too much for you to manage alone, and the equity would secure your care for years. The only misunderstanding," I replied evenly, "is your belief that I would allow my own daughter to steal my home and lock me away." Caroline flushed, glancing around nervously at nearby people who had begun to take notice of our confrontation. "Mom, you're confused. Remember how you left the stove on? How you got lost driving to the grocery store last month? I wasn't lost. Caroline, I decided to take a different route to avoid construction." "She's been doing this for months," Caroline said to no one in particular, her voice rising theatrically, making excuses covering for memory lapses. "It's why we've been so worried." "That's enough," Lisa cut in sharply. "Save your performance for the judge. Though I should warn you, Judge Martinez has seen every trick in the book when it comes to family members trying to seize assets under the guise of concern." Richard placed a restraining hand on Caroline's arm, murmuring something in her ear. Her face hardened as she looked from me to Robert. "So, this is how it's going to be? You're all ganging up against me when I'm just trying to protect Mom's future." "No, Caroline," I said, finding strength in the truth. "You're trying to protect your future at my expense. The house, the power of attorney, the nursing home. It was never about my welfare." Her eyes flashed dangerously. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Actually, I do," I countered. "I know about the financial trouble Richard's firm is in. I know about the loans you took from your father under false pretenses. I know you've already listed my house for sale without my knowledge or consent." Shock registered on her face, followed quickly by fury as she turned to Robert. "You had no right to share that information. He had every right." Michael interjected. "Just as Mom has every right to defend herself against your schemes." Before Caroline could respond, a bailiff called our case number. As we turned toward the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of uncertainty on my daughter's face. The first crack in her confident facade. Inside the courtroom, Judge Martinez, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with silver-streaked dark hair, surveyed all parties with shrewd eyes. After the initial formalities, Lisa presented our case succinctly: the forged power of attorney, the unauthorized housing, the pattern of Caroline undermining my independence and autonomy. When it was Richard's turn to speak for their side, he adopted a tone of reasonable concern. "Your Honor, we understand how this might appear, but we've been increasingly worried about Mrs. Wilson's cognitive state. The power of attorney was prepared as a precautionary measure, with her best interests at heart." "And was Mrs. Wilson present when this document was notarized?" Judge Martinez asked, peering over her reading glasses. Richard hesitated just long enough. She was indisposed that day, Your Honor, suffering from shingles, but she had verbally agreed to the arrangement. The judge's expression darkened. Mr. Harmon, are you suggesting that Mr. Weston notarized a document without the signatory present? James Weston shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Richard fumbled for a response. I have here, Lisa interjected Mrs. Wilson's medical records from that day, showing she was indeed suffering from shingles and had been prescribed significant pain medication. I also have the results of a comprehensive cognitive assessment performed yesterday, confirming that Mrs. Wilson is fully competent and shows no signs of cognitive impairment. Judge Martinez reviewed the documents carefully before turning her gaze to Caroline. Ms. Harmon, would you care to explain why you took it upon yourself to list your mother's home for sale without her knowledge? Caroline straightened, smoothing her expression into one of daughterly concern. Your Honor, my mother has been showing signs of financial instability. The house requires maintenance she can't manage. We believed the best course of action was to help transition her to assisted living where she would be safe and properly cared for. And the proceeds from the house sale, the judge pressed, would be held in trust for her care, Caroline replied smoothly. With you as trustee, I presume as her daughter, it seemed appropriate. Judge Martinez set down her pen and folded her hands. Mrs. Wilson, would you like to respond to your daughter's assessment of your situation? All eyes turned to me. I stood my hands steady, my voice clear. Your Honor, I have lived independently and managed my finances successfully for over 25 years since my divorce. I am retired but financially secure. My home is paid for. I have savings, and I receive both a teacher's pension and regular support payments from my ex-husband. I am neither incapable nor destitute. I paused, looking directly at Caroline. My daughter's actions were not motivated by concern for my welfare, but by her own financial interests. She and her husband took steps to seize control of my assets without my knowledge or consent, using a forged document to do so. The hearing continued for another hour with financial records presented, testimonies given. Robert confirmed the payments he'd been making to me for years now, officially documented as part of an amended divorce settlement. The medical specialist testified to my cognitive health. Michael provided evidence of the unauthorized changes to my house locks and utilities. Throughout it all, I watched Caroline's expression shift from confident to concerned to something close to panic as the weight of evidence mounted against her. Richard maintained his composure better, but the tightness around his eyes betrayed his growing awareness that their plan was unraveling. When Judge Martinez finally delivered her ruling, her words fell like hammer blows. The court finds clear evidence of attempted financial exploitation. The power of attorney is hereby invalidated. An injunction is granted preventing any sale of Mrs. Wilson's property without her explicit verified consent. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges of forgery and fraud, as well as to the State Bar Association for ethics violations related to the improper notarization. She fixed Caroline and Richard with a stern look. You should both consider yourselves fortunate that Mrs. Wilson has not pressed for immediate prosecution. As we rose at the judge's dismissal, I caught Caroline's eye across the courtroom. The confident, calculating daughter who had raised a toast to my failure was gone, replaced by a woman whose carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. Outside in the corridor, Lisa squeezed my arm supportively. Phase 1 complete. You did wonderfully, Elena. What now, I asked, feeling strangely hollow despite our victory. Now Michael said we go home and make sure they haven't done any permanent damage. Home. The word carried both comfort and unease. The locks were changed, the utilities shut off, and more importantly, the sanctuary I'd created for myself had been violated by my own daughter's betrayal. As we walked toward the exit, a voice called out behind us, "Mom, wait!" I turned to see Caroline hurrying after us alone. Richard was nowhere in sight. Her designer suit was slightly rumpled now, her perfect hair coming loose. For a moment, I caught a glimpse of vulnerability that reminded me of the little girl she'd once been. "Please," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "We need to talk. We need to talk." Caroline repeated her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. I glanced at Lisa, who nodded slightly. "We'll wait by the car," she said, guiding Michael and Robert toward the exit. When we were alone in the corridor, Caroline and I moved to a quiet alcove near a window. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the marble floor. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Richard's gone to call our attorney," she finally said, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "I thought James Weston was your attorney." "Not anymore." She smoothed her skirt, a nervous gesture I recognized from her childhood. "He's afraid of being disbarred over the notarization issue. He's withdrawn from the case." I studied my daughter's face. This person who'd been willing to strip me of my dignity, my independence, my home. The anger was still there simmering beneath the surface, but now mingled with something unexpected. Pity. "Why, Caroline?" I asked simply. She flinched at the directness of the question. "You wouldn't understand. Try me," she sighed, leaning against the window ledge. "Richard's firm is in trouble. Deep trouble, bad investments, a few cases that went sideways. We've been keeping up appearances, but we're drowning in debt. So you decided to solve your problems by taking my house, by forcing me into a nursing home. It wasn't like that. Not at first." A hint of defiance crept back into her voice. "We really were concerned about you living alone. The plan was for you to move in with us temporarily while we renovated the house, then sell it at a profit. The nursing home idea came later when you started pushing back. When I refused to be a convenient solution to your financial problems, I corrected." Caroline's shoulders slumped. "You make it sound so calculated. Wasn't it?" "It was survival," she countered. "Do you have any idea what it's like watching everything you've built crumble around you? The firm, our reputation, the children's private school tuitions?" "Actually, I do," I said, quietly. "When your father left us with nothing but debts and broken promises, I had to rebuild from scratch. I worked 2 jobs, clipped coupons, patched clothes instead of buying new ones. Also, you and Michael could have opportunities. That was different." "How?" "Because you have designer tastes and country club memberships to maintain." My voice remained level, but the words cut deep. "I made sacrifices for my children. You were willing to sacrifice your mother." Caroline had no answer for that. She stared out the window at the courthouse square below, where ordinary people went about their lives facing their own private struggles. "What happens now?" she finally asked. "That depends on you," I replied. "The judge has referred the case for potential criminal charges. Lisa believes we have enough evidence for a conviction." Fear flickered across Caroline's face. "You do that. Send your own daughter to jail. The old me, the peacekeeper, the self-sacrificing mother would have backed down immediately." but that woman had disappeared somewhere between the Mother's Day toast and the courtroom battle. "I don't want to," I said honestly, "but I will if I have to." The question is whether you're willing to take responsibility for your actions. What does that mean exactly? It means acknowledging what you did, making amends, accepting consequences. She laughed bitterly. And what would those consequences be? For starters, a formal apology to me, to your father, to your brother, then returning the money you took from your father under false pretenses, finally seeking help, financial counseling at minimum, therapy if you're willing. "You want me to go to therapy?" She sounded incredulous. "I want you to understand why you thought it was acceptable to destroy your mother's life to maintain your lifestyle." Caroline pushed off from the window ledge, pacing the small alcove. "And if I agree to all this, the criminal charges go away. I'll ask Lisa to pursue a civil resolution instead," I confirmed. "But Caroline, this isn't just about avoiding jail time. This is about whether we have any relationship going forward." She stopped pacing, something vulnerable crossing her face. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll always be your mother. But trust has been broken. Rebuilding it will take time and genuine effort on your part. And if I don't agree, then we proceed with the criminal charges and you face the consequences of your actions through the legal system." Caroline was silent for a long moment, the weight of the choice before her visible in her posture. I waited, giving her the space to make her decision. "What about Richard?" she finally asked. "What about him? He was part of this too." "Yes, he was," I acknowledged. "His choices are his own, as are yours." Something shifted in her expression, a realization, perhaps, that she was standing at a crossroads. "I need to think," she said, straightening her shoulders. "Take all the time you need," I replied, moving toward the corridor. "I'll be at home, my home when you're ready to talk again." This 3 months passed. The utilities were reconnected. The locks changed back. My life gradually returning to normal, though normal had taken on a new meaning. Robert's cancer treatment had begun with mixed results. The prognosis remained grim, but he faced it with a dignity I wouldn't have expected from the man who'd abandoned his family decades ago. Michael visited regularly from Seattle, rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. As for Caroline, she'd made her choice the day after the hearing. Richard had wanted to fight the charges to take his chances in court. Caroline had chosen differently. The apology came first, stiff and formal initially, but becoming more genuine as she talked. The financial restitution to Robert followed along with her agreement to attend counseling both for her financial decisions and for the deeper issues that had led to her behavior. Richard had filed for divorce a week later, unwilling to accept the path of accountability Caroline had chosen. His law firm was under investigation, his career in shambles. The grandchildren spent weekends with me now, while Caroline worked to rebuild her life, taking a position at a small legal aid office, a far cry from the prestigious corporate law she'd practiced before. Today she was coming for tea, a Sunday tradition we'd established during her journey toward amends. Our relationship remained fragile, measured in small moments of reconnection, rather than the easy closeness we'd once shared. Trust was a seedling that required constant tending. The doorbell rang precisely at 3. Caroline was punctual as always. I opened the door to find her holding a small package and a manila envelope. "Hi, Mom," she said, the greeting still carrying a trace of awkwardness. "I brought scones from that bakery you like. Come in." I replied, accepting the package. The kettle's just boiled. In the kitchen, she watched as I arranged the scones on a plate, her eyes taking in the subtle changes I'd made to the house. New curtains, a different arrangement of furniture, small assertions of my continuing independence. "How's Dad?" she asked, accepting the cup of tea I offered. "About the same. The treatments are difficult, but he's determined." I didn't elaborate on the growing friendship that had developed between Robert and me. Not romance, but a kind of peace neither of us had expected to find. Caroline nodded, turning the envelope in her hands nervously. "I have something for you from the counseling." She slid the envelope across the table, an echo of that Mother's Day lunch that seemed both recent and distant at the same time. Inside was a letter handwritten on several pages. "It's everything I couldn't say out loud," she explained, about why I did what I did, about the person I became. Without even realizing it, Doctor. Sanderson suggested I write it all down. I set the letter aside for later understanding its importance, but unwilling to shift the moment into heavier territory. "Thank you. I'll read it after you leave." "There's something else," she said, her voice steadier now. "I've been offered a position with the Elder Law Clinic. It's a huge pay cut from corporate law, but it feels right. Using my legal knowledge to prevent what I almost did to you." Pride, unexpected and warm, bloomed in my chest. That's wonderful, Caroline." "Is it?" Uncertainty clouded her features. After everything, redemption isn't about erasing the past. I said, finding wisdom in words I hadn't planned. It's about creating a different future. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Probably not," I agreed with gentle honesty. "But you're working to earn it, and that matters." We sipped our tea in a silence that felt, if not comfortable, at least less strained than before. "The kids miss the treehouse," she said eventually. "They were wondering if they could come over next weekend to play in it." "I'd like that," I replied. The grandchildren had been cautious around me at first, confused by the family turmoil. Gradually they'd relaxed, returning to the easy affection we'd always shared. As Caroline prepared to leave, she paused in the doorway. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That day at the restaurant, when I gave you the nursing home brochure, you said to the daughter who thinks this is the end of my story. You seemed so certain even then. How did you know you'd find a way through?" I considered the question, reflecting on the woman I'd been before that moment, competent but complacent, loving but perhaps too willing to be taken advantage of. I didn't, I admitted, but I knew I wasn't finished yet. After Caroline left, I sat on the porch swing opening her letter. The pages contained raw, painful truths about her resentment of the sacrifices I'd made after the divorce, her terror of financial insecurity after witnessing my struggles, her determination to never be vulnerable the way I had been. Beneath the calculated actions was a wounded child who'd learned the wrong lessons from watching her mother's resilience. Understanding didn't erase the harm done, but it created space for healing. I folded the letter carefully and went inside to call Michael, then Robert, making plans for a family dinner the following weekend. Not a reconciliation exactly, but a beginning. That evening, as I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who'd sat shocked and silent at that Mother's Day lunch. Stronger, clearer-eyed, unwilling to be diminished. Caroline's cruel toast had been meant to end my story, to write me off as a failure, an inconvenient obstacle to her plans. Instead, it had become the catalyst for my reclamation of my home, my independence, my sense of self-worth. I thought of the nursing home brochure, now a distant memory. My story wasn't ending. It was evolving. The future stretched before me, uncertain but mind ashape. Tomorrow I would call Lisa about the community legal clinic where I'd been volunteering, sharing my experience with other older adults facing similar challenges. Next week, I'd meet with the real estate agent about the small rental property I was considering as an investment. The following month, a weekend trip to Seattle to visit Michael. My last move hadn't been about revenge or punishment. It had been about reclaiming my power and setting boundaries that Caroline and everyone else would now respect. To the daughter who had thought it was the end of my story, it was merely the beginning of a new chapter, one written entirely in my own hand.